All right, in lesson 4, we're going to start looking at budgets and how budgeting works. The table shown represents budget of an average college student attending McLennan Community College. You see we have two different student budgets. One for students living at home with their parents. That totals up when you add tuition and fees, books and supplies, room and board, transportation, and personal and miscellaneous expenses, a little over $12,000 per year. For the student that's living off campus in an apartment, you can see that their expenses total about $15,710 per year. First question just says, what does room and board mean? What do you think makes the difference between the room and board for living at home with parents versus living in an off-campus apartment? I'm working on the assumption that you probably know that basically room and board is housing and food. Obviously, for the students that are living with home, their rent costs would be much less. They may pay no rent, or they may be paying a small amount of rent to their parents. The same thing, their food costs will be less if they're sharing meals with their family. Approximately what percentage of the total cost of attendance does room and board cost when living at home with parents? Try to work without a calculator and show your steps. So we're going to have to go back and see what percent room and board is when living with your parents. Well, if you live with your parents, room and board is $24.24 out of $12,119. So $24.24 out of a budget of $12,000, I believe it's 119. Remember, if we're doing a percent, our basic formula is we want to put part over the whole. So the entire amount being spent is this $12,000. The part is about $24.24. If we're going to do this without a calculator, then we may just want to round and come up with a rough percentage. Let's think about this. This is approximately, well, we can say 2,400 out of 12,000. Let's do a little thinking. 12,000 is pretty easy. If we're going to do a mental guess, I would say 10% of 12,000 is $1,200. Okay. Well, if we know that 10% is $1,200, then 2,400, that's twice as much. So $2,400 is approximately 20%, right? If 10% is $1,200, then if we double both things, then 20%, $2,400 would be about 20%. Approximately what percentage of the total cost of attendance do books and supplies cost when living at home with parents or living in an off-campus apartment? So let's go get. So books and supplies. Books and supplies are $1,222 no matter what. If you're living at home, it's at $12,119. If you're living in an apartment, our total is a bit more. So let's do the math on that. So, books and supplies. Whoops, wrong pen. We know that that was that was $1,222. All right, so living at home with parents, we have $1,222. Living with parents costs $12,119. That's the total cost for all of your school expenses. Well, we can see this is approximately 10%, right? 1,200 out of 12,000. So the answer here is going to be approximately that wavy equal sign, 10%. Now, if we're living off campus, it's 1,222, 15,710. That's not quite as easy. So 1,200 over about 16,000. This one doesn't seem as logical. We could kind of reduce that fraction. We could think about it, but let's go ahead and just do it exactly. If you need to calculate with a calculator, here's how you get percent. You take part over whole, that's going to give you a fraction or a decimal, and then we multiply it by 100 to get it into a percent. So if I do 1,222 divided by 15,710, and then I multiply that by 100, that will change my decimal into a percent. So 1,222 divided by 15,710 times 100, and that comes out to be 7.8% or 7.78%. Let's go out a little farther. Notice an interesting thing. Whoops. Sorry. It's less. Now, the actual cost of the books was the same in Part A and Part B. But since our budget was bigger in Part B, $1,222 represents a smaller percentage of the total budget. Does the difference in percentages mean that books and supplies cost more based on where a student chooses to live? And the answer to that is no. It costs the same at both places. Remember, it was a smaller percentage of the total budget when you lived in your own apartment simply because it takes more money to live in a separate apartment. But the actual cost for books and supplies did not change. Okay, here's another way of representing some of our data. This is called a pie chart. Anytime you have a pie chart, all of the percents have to add up to be 100. But one of the nice things is you can look and you can somewhat estimate what percentage things cost based on how big a section that is. We can see tuition and fees is more than 25%. It's more than a fourth. What fraction could be used to approximate the portion of the budget spent on room and board? So we're living at home with our parents. Here's room and board, and you can see that's less than a fourth, but it does look like bigger than a sixth, doesn't it? 20% we actually know is about 1/5. So the answer here would be 1/5. If we think about that in terms of percents, 20% means 20 out of 100. 20 out of 100 is the same as 1/5. But we can look at the picture and get an estimate. If a student has $1,160 to spend each month, how much is allocated to room and board? Try to work without a calculator and show your work. So we know that room and board is 20%. So we need 20% of $1,160. How do we calculate a percent of something? Anytime you see the word of, that generally means to multiply. So 20%, that's 20 over 100 times 1,160, or 0.20 times 1,160. It suggests that you don't need a calculator, but I'm going to suggest why not use a calculator. Go ahead and do 0.2 times 1,160. You get $232. Now, if you're aware that 20% is 1/5, the other way you could do it is say, well, I'm going to do $1,160 and I want 1/5, so I'm going to divide by 5. 5 goes into 11 twice. Bring down, we got to subtract, so 1/6. 5 goes into 16 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15. And we subtract and we bring down one more time. And 5 goes into 10 twice. And we see that we come up with the same answer. It's good to be able to do this kind of mental estimation. One more way to do 20% is to remember that 10% is easy to calculate. 20% of $1,160 would be 116. To get 10%, we just move that decimal one place. So if I have 2 of those, I'll have 20%. And that, of course, is still $232. So we have a few approaches when we really start to understand the relationship between fractions, decimals, and percents. Why is it important for the college to show students the actual values of the cost of attendance instead of percentages? How could potential students misinterpret percentages? Well, these are questions just to discuss and think about, but most of us understand the bottom line is how much money will I need? It's not as important perhaps to know if I'm going to spend, if $1,000 a month will pay for everything, that's what I need to know. It's less important to know that 20% will be on books and 5% will be on miscellaneous. Those things can be confusing at times. All right, lesson 4, part B, deals with using spreadsheets. I don't think there will be any place where you actually have to use a spreadsheet in this course other than to look at a problem and answer it. So I don't think we're going to actually be writing any Excel spreadsheets, but you do want to be able to interpret one. Okay. Most spreadsheets, another way of thinking that, they're just a rectangular array of information. They've got columns and they've got rows, right? The table shown represents the financial information for the average family in 2011 according to the Consumer Expenditure Survey. What does expenditure mean? An expenditure is simply money spent as opposed to savings. When you get your monthly paycheck, money that goes into savings is not an expenditure. Okay. But housing, food, alcohol, clothing, transportation, entertainment, these are things that you spend money on. What is an average family? Well, obviously, families come in many shapes and many sizes. Right now, the family that I'm living with is myself, my husband, and my mother, who's 90. Pretty impressive. Um, if you'd asked me that question 15 years ago, let's go back a little farther. If you'd asked me that question 20 years ago, my family would have been myself, my husband, and our 5 children, which would have been, you know, anywhere from 4 on up. We had a house full. That would have been a family of 7. Now I'm a family of 3. Typically, we think in America that the average family is probably 2 adults and 2 kids. Like I say, that's just a broad generalization because certainly there are many families that are larger than that. There are some people who live alone. What fraction could be used to approximate the portion of the family's income spent on food? So this family, there's food, $64.58. Well, how much money? Oh, portion of the family income. What's our income? There's our income. 63,685. Notice if I round those to the nearest hundred or so, that's 6,400 or 6,500. And this is about 64,000. I know that that's not perfect rounding, but I just want you to see that's about 10%. Again, these are approximations. Oh, then what fraction? If we want 10% as a fraction, then I should have said just 1/10. So there's the answer to the question the way they asked it. A spreadsheet is a computer program used to organize and analyze data. In the example, the description housing is in cell A3. Notice they wrote the column, that's column A, and then the row. So we can think of that as column, row. Which cell contains the amount spent on entertainment? Well, the amount spent on entertainment, here is the amount. If we go column, row, that's going to be B8. Notice it said the amount, not the description. So we're in the column B. Formulas can be used to perform calculations in spreadsheets using the cell names as a variable. For example, what do you think the formula B4 plus B5 would represent for the data shown? Well, B4 is right here, and B5 is right there. That would be the total for food, alcohol, and tobacco. You can see in this case it would be 64.58 plus 807. If we need to add that, we could do it by hand or we can get our calculator. 64.58 plus 807. bringing us to 7265. But this is really the answer. What does it represent? It represents the amount spent for those two quantities. Notice that the formula begins with an equal sign. This is a requirement when entering a formula. So if we were actually working in a spreadsheet and we wanted to enter a formula, we would go up here and we'd actually write in the formula equals. What would the formula look like that would calculate a family's total expenditures? Which cell should the result go in? Well, obviously the total expenditures are going to go in B, and this is 14, that's where it goes. And the formula would look like B2 starts with the equals plus B3 plus B4 plus B5, 5 plus B6, and we would just keep right on going, plus B7 plus B8 plus B9 plus B10 plus B11 plus B12 plus B13 plus that's it, B13. We don't go any farther. So, I'm not sure where my eraser is, so I'll just do that. Okay, let's keep right on going. What formula would calculate the difference between a family's income and its expenditures? Try to think of at least two different formulas that would work. Well, if we actually added all this up, in fact, the simplest formula, if you knew the total here, let me get my calculator, if we had actually had that calculated, 16,803 plus 6458 plus 807 plus 2374 plus 8293 plus 2572 plus 3630 plus 5106 plus 1166 plus 1721 plus 775. That came out to be, when I did it, 49705. So if you had filled that one in, the simplest formula would simply be income, which is B2 minus the total expenditures, B14. If we filled in the numbers, 63,685 minus 49,705, you can see that this budget has $13,980 left for savings. The longer formula would be B2, and notice, remember, we would start these with equal signs if we were actually typing them in, would be B2 minus, and then we'd need parentheses. And we would have to, parentheses, add up all of the others. B3 plus B4, all the way down, keep adding till you got to B13. What do you think happens to this extra money from question 7? Well, different families, different things. Hopefully it goes into savings. And savings can mean all kinds of things. It can mean retirement. It can mean vacation. Or it can just mean other, what I'm going to call luxury spending. luxury. Unfortunately, a lot of times if there's not a budget, it can also kind of just get squandered. That's why budgeting is really helpful. It helps you make sure that you're taking that extra money and putting it in things like saving for retirement, saving so you can take a nice vacation each year, saving to buy a new dining room table, those types of things. Okay, this just shows you, we're not going to go with this, how you actually enter. You click on the cell. So if we wanted to get this total, we click here, enter, and then we would enter the formula up here, equals, and we would write the formula that we wanted. All right, that's the end of this video. I'll see you in the next one.